I spotted the shooter dart to the other side of the roof to take another shot, giving themselves away. Vampire, I muttered, sending them a bullet to the heart. A killing shot. I was out of patience for disarming these bloody nuisances, and I wouldn't lose any sleep over killing them. 3 to go. James identified the other gunner as a Leica and shot them down, but the 2 knives remained. Azalea turned back, readying her rifle for another shower of shots. "Any time now would be great, you know," she said. I thought for a moment, the plan formulating in my mind. We could take the last 2 down easily, as long as there were no more, and if we allowed them to engage us in close combat, we might just find out what they were after. Of course, I'm sure a lot of people had a death wish on us, but all of them knew better than to act on it. No, they were here for another reason. "Let them board," I instructed the others. "It's pointless wasting bullets guessing how to kill them." Azalea nodded and allowed the other carriage to catch up with us. "I hope you bloody know what you're doing," she said. The 2 remaining figures jumped onto the roof of our carriage at once, where James and I were ready for them. They engaged us both immediately, slashing blindly with the knives, although it seemed they'd had a pitiful amount of training, and they weren't hard to gain an advantage over. I noticed James's attacker back off, which was odd, but in hindsight they must have realised that he hadn't got what they wanted. He was also likely to die or gain more serious injury if he continued attacking. He was a witch, and clearly not a particularly good one. Staggering a little from the broken bones in his leg that James had inflicted, he managed to leap back onto the black carriage. My attacker made a grab for my purse, pulling the clasp open so that a couple of the papers flew out. James, who was now free, darted over and bent the attacker's arm backwards. A vampire, but not as strong as him. "It is not polite to look in a lady's purse," I shouted, and lifting my skirt, promptly kicked the figure off the carriage. He had a couple of the papers scrunched in his fist, but he was yet to find out how useless they were. That was it. They were after the vial. I checked my purse quickly to find that it was still safe. He hadn't managed to take it. "Look out!" Azalea yelled suddenly. James and I grabbed the roof rail of the carriage again, bracing ourselves for another impact. The black carriage rammed us even harder, and there was this awful moment where we couldn't be sure if we were going to stay upright. And then we found out we couldn't. Azalea howled as we hit the ground, a loud, painful noise that seemed almost like a wolf's eye had involuntarily come out. I managed to kick back at the last second and land on my feet in a crouch. James broke his fall with a roll and stopped next to me. Both of us immediately looked at Azalea. She'd fallen from the seat, and part of the traces had broken off and jabbed deeply into her side. It looked painful, and there was a hell of a lot of blood. Josephine, now writhing on the floor, was more spooked than I had ever seen her, struggling in the tangled reins of the harness. The twisting and turning was doing no favours for Azalea, to whom she was still attached. We both quickly rushed to help her, but she shook her head. She was breathing heavily, and it looked as if the moving caused her a great amount of pain, but she leaned over and grabbed something else from under the seat, glancing down the street. The black carriage had stopped at the end of the road, and it looked as if it intended on coming back for a search. We had to do something sharpish. Azalea pulled the pin from something that looked worryingly like a grenade of some kind. "Smoke bomb," she said. Her voice sounded sort of a croak. "We need to work quickly. James, free Josephine. She knows her way back to the guild. Sigh. Give me a hand?" She tossed the smoke bomb, and a thick grey mist began to obscure everything in sight. Genius. That would buy us some time. I set to untangling the harness, shooting the trace when I got impatient with it. I heaved her up by the arm, passing it over my shoulder and supporting her by the waist as we hurried as best as we could away from the carriage and down a dark, narrow alley. It was hard to see in there, so I held to the hope that nobody saw us enter it. The plank of wood from the harness was still protruding from Azalea's side, but we didn't have time to try and remove it. "Well, they ruined my dress. Might as well make use of it," I muttered, lifting my overskirt and tearing the frills from the bottom of my petticoat, where the fabric was vast and strong. I took the length of cotton and used it to bind Azalea's wound as carefully as I could. "Thank you," she said lowly, as I helped her further along. "How are you?" I muttered. "Are you all right?" Well, that was tactless. Well, Si, I'm about as good as anybody who's got a giant stick in their side, she hissed. But I'll be fine. Let's just move. I can lick my wounds later. James joined us, bringing up the rear so that he could keep an eye out. So far we weren't being pursued, but as the smoke cleared, he pulled us back against the wall of the alleyway. One of the figures had approached the fallen carriage and was searching it. We held our breaths as they looked around the corner, but clearly didn't see us in the shadows and left. We stayed put until the black carriage sped past and out into the night. Thank goodness, I breathed. That was tedious, James mumbled. Now we had best get to the sun sector. We can relax then. Easy for you to say, Azalea groaned. We cautiously hurried out of the other side of the alley, Azalea limping next to me, a grimace on her face. She kept insisting she was fine, but that wound looked painful, and the makeshift bandage was already soaked in blood. It was a good thing we didn't have anything silver on that carriage. We glanced around to get our bearings, and the street sign made it apparent that we were just off Park Lane. The dark expanse of Hyde Park stretched out before us. We were only a few streets away from the sun sector. Come on, just a little further, I murmured, and Azalea just nodded with a pained expression as we shuffled as quickly as we could. It took about 10 minutes, and thankfully we didn't encounter any more of those hooded figures that had been chasing us. Just to top off the encounter, the heavens opened and the rain soaked us through as we walked. The water soaked through into the wound, making Azalea howl in pain once more. She bit her lip quickly, trying to quiet down as best she could. Luckily, we soon caught our first relieved glimpse of the building towering above the street. The sun sector did not hide its grandeur like our side of the guild, and made their home in a big fancy house with many floors and a twisted iron balcony. The guild symbol was painted on the brick by Jessie's expert hand. We approached the great black painted door and rapped the silver knocker. The day speaks, called Jessie's unmistakably sharp voice. The night will ever answer, I called back. Jessie, cut to the chase and let us in already, James added impatiently, casting a concerned glance at Azalea's wound. The rain was pelting us roughly as we stood outside the porch, as if we hadn't been through quite enough. The door opened and Jessie's silver eyes registered the sight of us, one eyebrow raised. We must have looked a sight. My hair fell in rat's tails down my face, my hat long departed, and the blood was still running down the side of my head. James was covered in cuts and gashes, the big one from the magic still trying to heal. His ponytail had fallen out and his hair hung in a damp curtain about his face. And Azalea? Well, Azalea had bigger problems. Jessie looked us up and down, a half-amused, half-concerned expression on her face. You look like shit, she said. Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to go and buy the book, Dead Night, as I say, is available on Amazon. I'll put all of the links you need in the description below. And I hope to see you at perhaps the next event, and enjoy.